Sure. I'm Mike Kaufman. I'm the Vice President of our Managed Infrastructure and Cloud Services Division.
Great. Let's get started with our agenda, and we'll jump right in. So first of all, thanks everybody for attending and taking a few minutes out of your day. Cybersecurity is certainly a big issue for a lot of folks. So what we're going to cover today is how the landscape is changing, the evolution of threats that we all face, some common misconceptions about cybersecurity, common concerns, and preferably, and everybody I think knows this, you really need to take a layered approach to security, cybersecurity in particular. And one of those components, employee security, we're going to go over why that's important. And we're going to talk about the cost of a breach. So where there is a risk, there's a cost. And we'll talk about security solutions that Aktion has that may help mitigate some of those risks. And then we'll have time for Q&A.
So, there's cybersecurity is becoming a greater and greater part of any type of IT management. It's prevalent in all of the industry discussions, between peer MSP groups. It's prevalent in a lot of the headlines that you see about anything to do with IT, ranging from, nation state cybersecurity activity down to, ransomware and individual businesses being impacted. We've put some statistics here about the evolution of cyber threats, and they're pretty significant. There's a ransomware attack every 11 seconds, and that statistic is holding true. And what we found as well, in addition to the things that we've thrown on the screen here, billions of dollars in damages or profits, I guess, depending upon which side of the line you're on. But in 2021, we saw the largest ransomware demand ever, $70 million to an IT services company or product. We've learned that now the average impact for productivity for a company who's been impacted by ransomware, 16 days of loss of use of data. And another important thing to share is that 80% of companies who pay ransoms are attacked again. So the threat is evolving. The landscape is dangerous, and there's a lot of risk out there. So we're here today to talk a little bit about the things that you can do to help ensure that your business is a less likely target.
Thanks, Mike. So one common misconceptions in what a layered security strategy must include, and one of those is protecting your employees, yourself and your employees, and how you go about doing that in a layered way. And some common misconceptions on that as well. Hey, my employees are smarter than that. They're not going to fall for any of this. My employees don't have time to do any training, or we're too small to be attacked. We don't have valuable data. Why would somebody attack us? We're covered. We have insurance if a breach happens. So these are some misconceptions that will get you in trouble. And in particular, one thing we wanted to dispel right away with especially ransomware, these guys, the cyber criminals, will attack anyone. Small organizations are particularly at risk because they usually don't invest the way mid-sized to larger companies invest in cybersecurity. So what kind of protections can you put in place? And that's really what we want to dispel some of these misconceptions. Don't think you're too small. You
Right.
make sure you have your employees spend some time, and we'll talk about some of that as we progress through this.
Right. Don't be the low-hanging fruit or the slowest antelope, as it were, because that's where trouble lies. So security, is it impacts not just necessarily the ability to operate a specific software function or a specific business function, but there's greater impact to businesses overall. When there is a breach, even if it's just one employee who clicked on one thing or entered their credentials into one phishing website, that breach can impact the entire company. And it can do things from raising insurance rates if you have cyber liability insurance and you're auditing and you're reporting as you're supposed to stay in compliance with those policies. Your premiums can go up depending upon whether you've either had a breach or whether you're able to successfully report what measures you're taking to protect yourself. It can affect your reputation. You can have customers leave, over time because of a failed deal or a failed order, based on a breach or based on exposure of their information potentially. You can lose time and money, obviously, payroll while employees can't perform their business functions because they don't have access to the systems they need to do their jobs. You can have a lot of, fixing the problem costs. Remediation costs can be more than the cost of prevention. Stitch in time saves nine, as the old expression goes. And hey, and you can lose the trust of your customers with their data, and you can even encounter employee morale issues where you're not taking steps to adequately protect the work that they're working hard to do. So all of those are big pieces of the puzzle as far from a business perspective, why security is so important.
Great. And we talked early on in the agenda about a layered security strategy, and that's what I want to try to address here. So you can't just do one thing and prevent an attack. It really requires a layered approach. And one of your first lines of defense is employee training and employee defense. So there are a number of things you could do there, but you would think that training your employees would be an easy thing. And there are really good training programs out there to take employees through and educate them on what a phishing email might look like, but just get them to think about cybersecurity. Um, so that's one area. The other area is the tools that many of us already use today, firewall and anti-malware. But the last two on this, anti-phishing and identity, multi-factor authentication, not everybody is doing that. Almost everyone has a firewall and almost everyone has antivirus or anti-malware, but phishing quite often does not involve malware. It's somebody trying to get you to enter their credentials to a bank website or to your email account or whatever. Identity theft is one of the biggest areas of cybercrime. Because once they get your
And
identity,
Steve,
they can get into your systems. Yeah,
well, I was just going to add to that, and I didn't know you were going to elaborate on the multi-factor authentication identity protection, but that is certainly a big issue. But we see that anti-malware is evolving as well, and I just kind of wanted to make sure that the folks that joined us today know that anti-malware that's kind of moving into an endpoint detection and response. Terminology. That the name for our traditional, what we used to know as Norton antivirus types of things, has evolved over time, and because of that evolution, it's really become both a detection and a response mechanism. So if you see that type of language out there, know that it is the next gen form of that old sort of antivirus.
very good. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so a lot of these things, even firewalls have next generation software in them. A lot of the new generation firewalls are light years better than the last generation in terms of security they provide. So keeping up to date on this stuff, you can't just buy a firewall, 7 years ago and think it's protecting you the way a brand new firewall would. The other major area too is system patching and remote monitoring and management. So we have many customers on here that are probably existing Action Managed Service customers. We deploy and make sure our customers stay patched. That's the biggest area that you could suffer from a cyber attack. If you click on a link, the cyber criminals will try to take advantage of an exploit. An exploit being a security flaw in the software or the operating system that you use that's not patched. And they have specialized software. Cyber criminals can just go buy a program to look for these flaws. They can drop it on your computer. If they find one of these flaws, they can then drop their malware in. So that's a very important part of your layered security approach to make sure all your user systems are patched, all your servers are patched, everything is patched, and you're remotely monitoring and managing those. So that's a real key area of this multi-layer approach. And I think the last one, of course, is like a duh. You have to have a really good backup and disaster recovery solution because no matter how
So
well you protect yourself, something could still get through. And if they do get through, then you want to make sure not only you have a backup, but an off-site backup that the bad actors cannot get to. Because if you do have a breach, the first things these guys will look for is your backups, and if they find them, they'll encrypt and corrupt those first. Then they'll attack your main system. So you have to have a backup that they can't reach. So anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
No, hey, I just wanted to add to that. In some of the research that I've been doing, I've uncovered some interesting statistics about the adoption of backup and disaster recovery, and the number of companies that actually reported that they were forced to pay after a ransomware attack, and it actually has gone down. In the past few years, by about 3%. And that is attributed to the adoption, the response of industry to the rise of ransomware, by implementing really effective backup and disaster recovery solutions. So, hey, if you're looking at ways to shore yourself up and make sure that you're being protected, implementing a good backup and disaster recovery solution is a really good sort of base layer for that security strategy. It really it's helping to move the needle on this. While the number of attacks are increasing, the number of folks that actually have a breach, find that if they're doing a really good job of their backup and disaster recovery, they are able to recover.
Indeed. Okay. Go ahead, Mike.
So I'll talk a little bit about the human factor. We kind of referenced a little tongue in cheek, that our trusted employees can be accomplices in cybercrime, but it's true that with email being one of the primary vectors for compromise, for cybersecurity infiltrations, kind of understanding how you can educate your staff and making sure that they are your ally and not a cyber security or cybercrime accomplice is a key piece. So ways to do that. One is, uh, make sure that you understand if some of your employees have already been compromised. The dark web is sort of a marketplace for credentials, for data breach, data, credit card numbers, or social security numbers, or personal identifiable information, and a lot of times it's logins and passwords to websites. And employees need to understand that reusing credentials is a huge risk, because if one site that they were using the credentials at is compromised, is hacked, and then those credentials are sold, you can bet that the folks that purchase those credentials are going to be trying them in all the places that they think would be most lucrative for them to get into. So knowing what's out there on the dark web, making sure that folks are aware that their username and password was compromised, and then instituting that policy is a really strong way to start having folks be aware of what they can do to protect against cybercrime. Also, baseline security training, just letting them know, always be suspicious. If an email doesn't look right for any reason, or if you have any question about it whatsoever, use a confirmation method outside of email. Uh, Executing simulated phishing attacks. This is where you send out emails on purpose, trying to catch people, trying to lure them into clicking on a potentially suspicious link, so you can identify where your weak spots are and help those folks understand how their actions can impact the whole company. Um, Monitoring as new threats emerge, as new trends emerge, as new types of attacks come into being, making sure that folks are made aware of those and can be on the lookout for any type of attack. Um, and then, of course, having good written security policies and procedures, a stated, IT equipment use policy or corporate network use policy, what's acceptable, what's not, that's important as well. And then finally, combining all these things into some, auditable, uh, you know, uh, evaluation metrics, so that you can actually measure your risk and then take steps in an ongoing manner to make sure that you're minimizing the chance that you're going to have a problem. So your folks are really one of the most important pieces of your IT protection strategy. In fact, the cybersecurity experts are always talking about people, process, and technology, and people are always at the front of that.
And I want to follow up a little bit on that related to employees. So when you look at this little stat, it's kind of eye-opening. Human error linked to over 92% of data breaches. So you can't ignore employee education. Well, you can ignore it. Let me restate that. You can ignore it, but the risk is very large when you do ignore it. And so being able to work with your employees, provide at least some measure of training, so they are prepared if one of these suspicious emails comes in. And all you really want them to do is be suspicious. That's not all, but that's the main thing. If they're suspicious and you got to avoid that automatic click. Oh, I just got a fax from Sally, and you click on this link to see the fax. Boom, you just drop malware on your computer. And you have to look at these emails. You have to see samples of it, and that's what training is all about. One of the things here in there are surveys of IT companies, over 70, almost 80% of IT companies like Aktion have reported clients being struck by ransomware. While we evangelize on protecting our clients, no matter no matter what, sometimes one will get through. And a lot of times we get the calls like, hey, I just got struck by ransomware. Can you help us? Because we're not their full-time IT company, but we have to go in and try to clean up the mess. And then we become their IT company because they don't want to go through it ever again. But those kind of things. And one last thing on employee security that we haven't touched on very much, but if you do have cyber insurance, many times if you have a policy, one of the questions, do you provide at least annual training or periodic training for cybersecurity training for your employees? You want to be able to say yes to that. And so you can keep your cyber insurance. So 66% of IT providers report phishing emails as the top ransomware delivery method. And we'll talk a little bit more about phishing as we go on. So phishing can be a very risky method for cyber criminals to attack any company of any size. And finally, it's not 100% guarantee, but providing that basic end user training is one of your best protections. It's not the only protection, but it's one of your best ones. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into solutions for some of these. So there we go. Mike?
So, hey, breaches are really expensive. There are a number of surveys out there that would tell you that the global average of the cost of a breach in total is about $760,000. Now, it's a little lower for smaller organizations. For organizations, between 100 and 1,000, the cost of a breach is about $500,000, and it scales down and up from there, as you would expect. What comprises that cost? What exactly am I going to have to shell out for if my organization is hit, and I'm in a spot where I've got to pay for remediation? Well, so hey, you need someone to help you through the problem. Not just how do I get my data back, but how do I deal with, the potential exposure of client information? Who am I liable to? What's the issue there? Then you have leadership from your organization who needs to be involved in those conversations. So you're doing crisis management. You're figuring out how to get through this to the next stage. Do you have you set up someone to answer calls from your customers after you send out a notification that they were potentially exposed through your breach? Who's going to help protect your brand? Who's going to protect your name from or your reputation from suffering a hit? Find out what happened. What are you going to do to let everyone know how this works? And then how, do you actually have to offer some type of watch or credit monitoring to make sure that you've remediated with your customers or with the folks who may have been impacted in your customer set from your breach. So there are a lot of things here that can add up, and not every one of these things will be relevant to every organization that suffers a breach, but it's important to talk about some of the things that you will have to do that you may not have thought about before.
Indeed. So while we brought up the topic of cyber insurance, this is something that I think everybody should pay attention to. If you don't have cyber insurance, you should investigate it. If you do have it, you're probably finding that the cyber insurance companies are getting way more stringent on the questionnaires you have to fill out. And why is that happening? And that's because they have suffered tremendous losses with the growth in cybercrime. So to mitigate those losses, they want to make sure you're doing everything you can to protect yourself before they will insure you. So you have to fill out these questionnaires. Do you have regular scheduled cybersecurity assessments? Have you documented your update and patch process for your connected devices? Do you have a written and tested disaster recovery plan? You have a cyber incident response plan, have EDR. So have EDR behavior. So that's what Mike was talking about earlier. Anti-malware, this new EDR level, next generation anti-malware, where they look for typical behavior of a cyber crime type malware. So if they detect one of the typical, and I'll give you an example, one typical behavior of a ransomware event is drop the software in, then you phone home to Kazakhstan to get an encryption code. Well, this kind of EDR software can detect behavior like that and shut it down before it can really do some damage. So they want to make sure you have that next gen kind of, the cyber insurance wants to make sure you have that next gen EDR type anti-malware. Here's the question I just mentioned last slide. Regular cybersecurity awareness training for your employees. Do you have a password manager to allow employees to manage passwords so they're not reusing the same password over and over again? You have multi-factor authentication implemented so you protect your identity, and cyber criminals cannot log into a site without having that smartphone with your MFA code on it. And and finally, do you have specialized anti-phishing software? So these are just some of the questions that you'll run across. You want to try to address all of these, especially when you have cyber insurance. And if you don't have cyber insurance, again, last thing, you should look into getting it because of the financial liability you incur without having insurance.
Yeah, the cybersecurity insurance industry is really growing very quickly right now. And it's evolving. It started out, 10 years ago as kind of a one-off for a lot of insurance companies. But as the risk has grown to both policyholders and to insurers, all of the infrastructure, all of the requirements for those policies have grown to be more and more stringent. So while, as Steve said, is extremely valuable and critical, really, to have a good cyber insurance policy, it is also critical to make sure that you're taking the proper steps to protect yourself and to stay compliant with the policy that you purchased. So, hey, that's something that we help with every day. Folks bring us, a list of the requirements from their cyber insurance provider. Hey, my cyber insurance provider said that if I don't do these things, they won't pay if I have to make a claim because I got malware or because I got ransomware or because we've got to somehow make restitution to our the folks that were in our database that were exposed. So hey, I want to go through here a little bit about the products that we think are very good solutions for cybersecurity in kind of each of the categories that we talked about a little bit. So employee training and defense, this is going to be a set of products that we always combine or recommend combining to give protection from the email attack vector for our customers. So we have Proofpoint, Iron Scales, and Breach Secure now as as uh, as three of our solutions. So Proofpoint and Iron Scales work together to protect the inbox. They provide both anti-spam in a lot of either contains malware or contains a link to a malicious site that might infect a machine. Iron Scales they're offering as well the anti-phishing, which allows for both employees that receive a suspicious email to report it and have it report all the way through the organization that it was a suspicious email. And then also to aggregate those reports both through their own detection engine and the reports of other users of the product. So you really get a lot of crowdsourcing, and you get a lot of use from their AI and detection engine there as well to protect the inbox. And then Breach Secure now is a really good platform for that ongoing education that Steve has mentioned a few times. So a really good product. It allows you to actually set up a dashboard and monitor the progress of every employee. They each get a score, a secure score in your organization, so you can kind of keep track of who's following up, who's keeping up with that type of technical education, and who might have failed or who might not be keeping up. And that can give you some really good direction on how to help those employees who maybe haven't have kept up with the technology, or are the weakest link in your organization. Help them to strengthen their suspicion, and engage in more secure behavior. Then on the firewall, and endpoint detection and response, anti-malware, in that category, we prefer the Sonic Wall. We think they have a great product. Their latest generation of firewalls has outstanding throughput and outstanding protection, from really all of the traffic that's going in and out of your network. Sentinel-1 is really industry-leading endpoint detection software. They actually, provide not just an agent to try to detect, suspicious behavior on each endpoint, and then, shut that down as soon as it starts. But we're also working with them to explore their sort of more active management and remediation capabilities as well, so that they've got, a security operations center where alerts are evaluated and responded to in conjunction with Action engineers. And finally, Cisco, of course, is an industry leader of firewalls as well, and they've got their standard Cisco brand, and the what we're seeing a lot more of in the managed services space as well, Meraki, which does switches and wireless access points and access points, and firewalls as well. So in addition to those, a good remote monitoring and management software, keep an eye on what you have, and then make sure that all of the latest patches, and firmware or operating system patches are in place to protect against those exploits that Steve mentioned earlier. Those holes, those places where the original version was vulnerable to a specific type of attack, to make sure that you don't have an easy path for someone to get in and compromise. And then finally, that all critical base layer of backup and disaster recovery. And that's going to include a number of different solutions. We've got StorageCraft, which is typically we use that for backing up on-premise servers to the Action Cloud. eVault is another product that we use in certain circumstances where it has a better fit. It counts what's being backed up a little differently than StorageCraft, and depending upon how you have your data deployed or have your servers deployed on-prem, one or the other of those might be a better fit. And then of course, Dropsuite allows us to back up Office 365, Exchange, Teams, SharePoint data for every SharePoint tenant, every 365 tenant that we help to manage. This is a really critical piece, we think, of being engaged or being invested in Microsoft's 365 environment. You don't necessarily want to have a Microsoft be the only arbiter, the only repository for this data in case you need to recover it and there's an issue with Microsoft for any reason.
Okay, so this covers some of the managed services, the IT services that Action provides. So we've talked a lot about cybersecurity. We package a lot of those things into some of the managed service plans for our Ultimate. We have several of the plans you see here: Ultimate, Hybrid Cloud, and Platform and Application Services. Many of you might already be one of our managed service customers, so we may already be covering you for some of those. A lot of these systems we've talked about are required for one of our Ultimate customers. And so we also offer them what I would call a la carte. If you're not a managed service customer and you just want to get some of these next generation security tools, we can provide those as well. But it's a real critical piece of the service we provide to our managed service customers. They depend on us to make sure they have the latest and greatest protection, and these are the products we've selected to deploy. The Microsoft 365 migrations and support. So we have a lot of customers who are migrating their legacy ERPs like Sage or Infor to our data center, and they want to go full cloud. Then we'll help them migrate to 365 or SharePoint and OneDrive and Teams and Exchange Online. to get all that outbound, outside of your four walls. Managed security, and that's really where we could take just a security only approach and implement and set up some of these products and monitor and manage them for you just from a security perspective. Data protection and cloud backup, that's a real critical piece of any security strategy. We talked about that already. And how do we make sure everything you have gets backed up and can be recovered in the event of a cyber incident? And one final thing is offering assessments. So if you're not currently an Aktion customer and you want us to do an assessment for how protected you are, or the converse to that is how vulnerable you are, we do offer some of these cloud readiness, network and infrastructure and security assessments to help you realize what you might be missing and where you might have gaps.
So, hey, we real quickly here, I see we're at the end of our time, but I just kind of wanted to talk through, our cloud services. We have, and you're probably familiar with this, but we have our cloud services division, which offers hosting for, a lot of the software that Aktion deploys, implements, and supports. We run that with SOC certification, which is a service organization controls. That's a process that ensures we're using best practices for security and for operation to protect your data. We're hosting, a large number of servers, and we've had really great uptime over the past 5 years. We're also managing a lot of on-premise systems, endpoints, and on-premise servers with 8,000 devices under our management right now. And of course, if you do host with us, you can always use your qualifying Microsoft 365 licenses on servers in the Aktion cloud.
And I think to wrap this up, just a little bit about Aktion. If you're not familiar with the company, we're over 230 employees now, 6,500 customers. Our headquarters is in Toledo, Ohio, with offices in Phoenix, Charlotte, and Minneapolis. And I'm missing one, but I lose track after a while. Anyway, so we're a software reseller and distribution and construction and architecture and engineering. But the division Mike and I are in is in our infrastructure and cloud services division. So we're very technology focused in our division, and we support many customers that are running the software that we also represent. So we have very deep knowledge in the industries we serve. We have 2 company-owned data centers, one in Northwest Ohio, the other one in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I think very telling, we are number 19 on the 2021 Accounting Today VAR 100 list. Many industry recognitions for Aktion as a managed service and a value-added reseller. And that wraps it up. And I don't know if we have time for questions. We'd be happy to hang around a little bit. I know we're a little bit over time, but anybody that wants to hang on, if you have some questions, we'd love to address them now.
Yeah, I think we have time. We could just do one quick question that came in, and it was, what cybersecurity product do you recommend for bring your own device, BYOD, mobile endpoints?
That's a really good question.
So,
I think let me take one stab at it, Mike, and then I'll let you follow up on that too.
sure.
Yeah. So one of the things that we highly recommend is depending on there is mobile device management software that you can use to take control of these bring your own device type things. Because one of the risks that you run is if you just have unlimited access to your corporate data, then you have an employee that comes and goes. Well, they can take all your data with them if you allow non-company owned devices to access your data, your customer lists. I mean, all kinds of things. With the right kind of mobile device management software, you can, if you have an employee leave, you can pull your corporate data off their phone without having to wipe and brick their phone. If you have company-owned devices, you can also use this kind of software to manage those company-owned devices as well. So that's one area that you should look at, and I'll let you follow up on that, Mike.
No, Steve, I think you did a fine job of describing, the importance of mobile device management. So that is absolutely the direction we would recommend.
Okay. Any more questions, Liz?
We have one more that came in. What is the single most effective step that we can take to better protect our company?
Mike?
I would say that, engaging the easiest one is to make sure that you're fully engaged with a managed service provider. If you want to go more granular than that, I'm recommending MFA to everyone by default. Turn on multi-factor authentication in every place that you can. And multi-factor authentication protects you in the event that those credentials, the login and password, are compromised. Having that third factor, something that you have instead of something that a cell phone, a separate device that you confirm that you are who you say you are, really adds a layer of protection to every entrance or every portal, every program where you have it enabled. That is a quick and easy step, and once folks have gotten used to doing that, it just becomes part of the routine.
Yeah, here's one interesting thing you might think about too, to answer that is call a couple of cybersecurity insurance companies. Tell them you're interested in getting insurance. What are their requirements? They will educate you on what you need to do. And so you're not just hearing it from us, you're hearing it from the industry that has to pay for it if you don't do it. So
great recommendation, Steve.
Solid tip.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Mike and Steve, thank you so much for presenting for us. If you would like to receive a copy of today's recording, please feel free to reach out to me, Liz Sidney. My contact information is in the chat, and I will send that over to you as soon as possible. If you have any other additional questions, Steve and Mike's information is on the screen. Mike and our Action sales team will be in touch and following up. At the end of this webinar session, there will be a survey pop-up on your browser window. Please fill that out for us. Your feedback is extremely important to us. We'd love to hear it, bad, good, everything. And again, if you have any immediate questions, please feel free to contact me directly. Thank you, everyone, so much for your time and for joining us today.
Thanks,
everyone. Hope you found the content of value.